17-year-old female.
A truck rolls over, and the trauma team battles to keep the youngest child of a devastated family alive.
How do you say goodbye to someone that you love?
A young man's dream of city life turns into a nightmare.
I've never felt nothing like this in life.
And a man on vacation with his fiancée is thrown from an ATV.
No helmet, fell off the back.
Now the trauma team fights to keep him alive. If they lose, a love story will get cut short, just as it was beginning.
Nick, open your eyes.
Nick.
Try to keep it very simple in trauma. No matter what has happened to the patient, we always focus first on the resuscitation, the ABCs, airway, breathing, circulation. In blunt trauma, they come in, they all look the same. They all have a collar, they're all on the board, they're unconscious, and they have bruising everywhere. You're not sure what's going on internally. And that's where you have to try to decide what is the area that's most likely to kill the patient.
High above the city, the roar of chopper blades ominously announces the arrival of St. Michael's Hospital's first trauma victim of the evening.
This is a 17-year-old female found approximately 40 feet from the vehicle.
Jacqueline, a 17-year-old athlete, was out on a quick errand to the laundromat when tragedy struck. The truck she was riding in rolled over 3 times, ejecting Jacqueline, landing her in the hands of the trauma team. Now trauma team leader Dr. Ahmed is hoping to find, in the first critical hour, answers to what injuries are threatening this young teen, the baby of a devastated family.
This can't be happening to us.
She'd just gone out 5 miles down the road, and the phone rang, and we live out in the country, so but the woman on the phone couldn't give directions. She was too upset, and we could hear Jacqueline screaming in the background. Got there, and she went into coma, and there's a helicopter, and just the thought you couldn't get in the helicopter, and they take her away, you know.
They needed to get Jacqueline out of the countryside and into St. Michael's trauma unit fast.
Well, she had a little bit of, not that much vertigo. I mean, I'm sure you can take a...
What Dr. Ahmed is most concerned with is the massive gash on Jacqueline's forehead, a troubling clue pointing to a severe head injury. The possibility of damage to her brain is very likely. The stakes for this young teen just went up.
If the brain is suffering, from the time the patient is injured, each minute that passes is a minute that the injury becomes more severe and maybe become irreversible.
A tragic possibility. If she lives, Jacqueline could lose the mobility she needs to pursue her passion, basketball. But more than that, she could have her personality severely altered, forever losing who she was.
She's starting to wake up a little bit.
Jacqueline, you were in an accident. You're in the hospital, at St. Michael's Hospital, and trying to take care of you, okay?
Sure, and then after that, we'll try to switch right in.
She's what? She's in there. She's aware.
Jacqueline, open your eyes.
Let's see if we can get her localized to pain.
Jacqueline, open your eyes.
To see how much of her body is still reactive, they hope to get responses from Jacqueline by causing pain.
Okay, let's get her some fentanyl, please. And some more Versed. She localized with pain. Both sides.
They get a reaction, but just on one side. Jacqueline may never move the left side of her body again. Evidence of a bleeding brain that could kill Jacqueline is mounting, and so is Dr. Ahmed's determination to fight and keep her alive. She knows that for Jacqueline, time is running out.
So in the trauma room, we're always thinking about the time that it takes the patient to get an operation that they may need, or time to CT to identify injuries that may be life-threatening.
Now, 23 minutes into the critical hour, Dr. Ahmed worries that this young girl before her, so full of dreams, is already beginning to slip away. Another teen victim arrives at St. Michael's Hospital, this time a frightened young man. 18-year-old Jake Gardner recently moved from Nova Scotia. He came to see if he could make it in the big city. And now, after being struck down by not just one, but 2 cars, he just prays he can make it until tomorrow.
Do you have any numbness in your feet?
Yeah.
You do?
Tingly in my toes.
Which toes are numb?
All of them.
Tingling toes is an alarming sign of a damaged spinal cord.
Good. Curl it down.
An injury that may have Jake facing a future where he would never move his legs again.
Tingles real bad down here.
Okay.
Where you're rubbing.
In the thigh?
Yeah.
Not down
like
by the toes?
Pins and needles.
Okay.
Things are not looking good for Jake. The doctor needs to find out quickly what's happened to his spine.
Breath in and grit your teeth. We're going to go back, okay? Ready? Everybody ready? Ready. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Slow deep breath, okay? Take.
They'll perform a log roll so they can examine in detail each of Jake's vertebrae, searching for any signs of fracture or dislocation.
Check that.
Okay. Jake, just let me know if any of this is sore at
Turn your head just exactly to the side of your Jake. All right. If we lift him up a bit, you can get that stuff on him. Yeah, lift him up. Oh, very good.
The team is satisfied that Jake's spine survived the pounding intact. So the source of his tingling toes and his excruciating pain remains a mystery, one that orthopedic resident Dr. Biederman hopes can be solved with x-rays.
And you're doing really good, Jake. Shaft bending wedge, right? He's got a small little butterfly fracture. So it looks like this patient had fracture of his left thigh bone, something that needs to be dealt with urgently.
The devastation to Jake's leg is enormous.
You basically broke the biggest bone in your body, bro. And you got to stand on it for the rest of your life. That could be very, very serious, you know?
The problem is you've got a proximal fracture, so it's very difficult to get a good reduction.
If Dr. Biederman is to give Jake a fighting chance at keeping his leg, he'll need to get it into traction right away. But there's a darker side to this story. The team knows that the force required to break Jake's femur must have been massive. And the likelihood of deadly internal injuries is too high to be ignored. They need to get Jake stable and to CAT scan as soon as possible. Dr. Biederman has a temporary solution, one that will not be easy for Jake. They'll use a splint and realign the broken bones that may be cutting off the blood supply to the rest of his leg, hopefully buying the doctors the time they need to get this young man to CT. Despite sedation, the procedure will be incredibly painful for Jake.
Hey, Jake. Crack your teeth really hard together and just take some nice slow deep breaths through your nose,
Okay. Yeah, okay.
I've never felt nothing like this in my life.
That'll go away in a second.
Nothing before in my life.
But if you...
The trick is just
It's gonna make it stop, right?
We get her 10 of vecuronium.
It's been just over half an hour since young Jacqueline arrived at St. Michael's Hospital, her life hanging by a thread, after her head was smashed in a car wreck. The trauma team desperately searches for clues as to why there is no response on one side of her body. Outside, her parents wait, searching for their own answers.
Why did this happen? You raise a child, especially with Jacqueline, like she had a hard birth and you almost lost her, and you rally, like you protect her, and then all of a sudden...
Trauma team leader Dr. Ahmed suspects that Jacqueline is suffering from a severe brain injury.
If the brain is suffering because of poor blood flow or lack of oxygen, it becomes more severe and maybe become irreversible. So we're going to draw some blood, get a chest x-ray and a pelvis x-ray, and go to scan for her face and her head.
The team will investigate two vulnerable areas, her pelvis and lungs.
A lot of very rich blood vessels that course through the pelvis. If they're torn from a pelvic fracture, can die from in the trauma room because of bleeding.
Dr. Ahmed knows a fractured pelvis is one of the most dangerous injuries. Its massive network of fine blood vessels makes it difficult to repair before it kills. The team will have to scrutinize the x-rays meticulously to ensure that Jacqueline's life is not bleeding away.
There's no broken bones in her pelvis. Beautiful. Young moaning.
Mm-hmm. Not even that.
Look at that.
Fully grown up.
Her pelvis intact, the team now looks to her lungs to source out the second threat to Jacqueline's brain: poor oxygen.
We're looking at her chest, and thankfully her chest actually looks pretty good. But no rib fractures, there's no bruising in the lung. Okay, so her teeth nails are fine. Coming up.
Good news for Jacqueline. Her body, by some miracle, is unharmed, despite being savaged in a brutal car rollover.
Let's get the size on, and let's go to CT scan.
But it's still situation critical for Jacqueline. The team is desperate to CAT scan her brain, and Dr. Ahmed feels time weighing heavy against this young girl's odds.
Time is brain.
It's already been 42 minutes into the first critical hour, and with a possible brain injury, every second counts.
Tony, how long before the helicopter landed before she was in the trauma room?
It was 2 minutes.
Okay, good. Excellent. Let's get her off.
And so this teen, who is just months away from graduating from high school, is loaded into the CT scanner while the team anxiously awaits the results. And downstairs, her parents wait in a state of shock.
You hear about this stuff happening to other people, but you never ever think it's going to happen to you. Just to go through it, somebody like Jacqueline. But I think inside, I'm prepared for the worst.
But how do you say goodbye to someone that you love?
Over the next few minutes, the team will have evidence as to whether the baby of their family, Jacqueline, and her dreams are dying. At St. Michael's Hospital, the trauma team is trying to save the life of Jacqueline, the teenage victim of a horrific car rollover. When she was ejected, her head was smashed at highway speeds into the pavement. Now the team anxiously waits for CAT scan images of her brain to see how severely it has been damaged.
I got her to localize with her right side, not her left side.
Trauma team leader Dr. Ahmed hopes the scans will reveal more than whether Jacqueline will be able to regain her motor skills. She wants to know if this young girl will ever taste life as a normal adult.
She's young, so it's bad because the brain is inside a very tight cranial vault. In older people, there's more space around the brain. There's more space for things like blood and swelling. In younger people, we don't have that luxury, and so it becomes very tight very quickly.
This makes Jacqueline's already dangerous injury even more deadly.
That's okay. So you guys want it?
The first images come online. Making sense of the tangled mass of blues and grays is a daunting task, and one that carries the weight of a young girl's future.
You got a little bit of shift to the left.
Bad news. Her head is bleeding so badly, it is changing the very shape of her brain. Now the chance of Jacqueline ever living a life as a normal teen is very unlikely. And it just got worse.
Bright white here that's sitting on the right part of her frontal cortex is acute bleeding from the trauma.
The part of Jacqueline's brain in charge of social behavior is seriously damaged.
She's got a significant contusion or bruise on the frontal part of her brain on the right side, as well as some blood around her brain, which is known as subdural hematoma. So These injuries can be very tricky because of the pressure in her brain, and we're concerned that if she has progression of the bleeding in her head, that she'll go directly to the operating room.
If Jacqueline's brain continues to bleed in her already tight skull, it could do more than just destroy her ability to think. It could crush her brain until she's dead. The brain surgery she would need to relieve the swelling is a risky gamble at the best of times. But in Jacqueline's delicate condition, it would be even more dangerous. Before Dr. Ahmed can decide whether to try letting her wake up or perform a dangerous operation, she needs to determine whether the bleeding inside Jacqueline's head has stopped.
The same?
Let me know when I can do it there.
Because it's hard to compare that CT with this one.
But it's a little bit more apparent or obvious on this. I don't know about her subdural. Her brain's so tight. Her brain's so tight.
Across the hospital, the trauma team races Jake Gardner to CAT scan after he was run down by 2 tons of speeding automobile. They need to get him to CT quickly to see what damage the crash may have caused him internally. It wouldn't be the first time they've seen a patient die on the table from unseen injuries.
Here you can see it quite nicely on the scout film here. So he's got the very obvious broken leg. And the question is, does he have any injuries in his torso, above their abdomen and chest, that weren't obvious on what we did in the trauma room?
Jake came to the city only a few weeks ago with the hope of a fresh start. And now, 54 minutes into the critical hour, the team waits anxiously to see if this teen's dream of big city life could be ending in tragedy. What the scans reveal is surprising for the team.
From here all the way down to here basically shows no abnormality whatsoever.
Miraculously, there are no internal injuries, but this young man's ordeal is far from over. The severity of Jake's shattered thigh bone will still have a powerful impact on his new life.
How long will it be here?
In the hospital, you'll probably be here. You need to be in traction for 6 weeks to get this to heal. So,
Jake doesn't have 6 weeks to recover. If he stays in hospital that long, he will lose his job, his apartment, and he will have to start all over again, looking for a home, a life, and a future. But there's another option.
Otherwise, you need the operation. So it's a risk of infection. There's a risk of getting a blood clot, but we have to put you on blood thinners to reduce that risk. You'll probably be here a few days. We'll get you up right away, and we'll get you up on crutches. I need you to consent for the operation.
Jake decides to take the risk in exchange for a dramatically shorter recovery time and a better shot at continuing to pursue his big city dreams. Upstairs, the surgical team prepares the operating room, where in a few minutes, orthopedic surgeons will try to save Jake's leg and his future. Across town, an ambulance arrives at Sunnybrook and Women's College Health Sciences Center with 53-year-old Dana Gibbons. Just 23 minutes ago, Dana was cruising one of his favorite snowmobile routes when the unthinkable happened. Now Dana lies shattered and in the hospital, while the trauma team tries to discover what injuries he may have suffered. Whatever damage the accident may have wrought on his body, head and neck injuries are the team's biggest concern.
Got a sign cut underneath his chin, underneath his helmet, so that's why we called you.
The sign hit you in the head as you went under the sign. All right. Did you get up and walk around? You just laid there.
Neurologist Dr. Bultron will conduct tests to map Dana's spinal sensations.
Sharp like a pin? How about here? Here?
Tests that in the next few minutes will determine whether Dana, an avid outdoorsman, will become a paraplegic. It's been just 15 minutes since 53-year-old Dana Gibbons was rushed to Sunnybrook and Women's College Health Sciences Center. While out joyriding a favorite snowmobile trail, tragedy struck. Now the team fears Dana's neck might be broken, and he may never move on his own again. The doctors need to rule out spinal cord damage, and they begin to search for any signs of lost sensation in Dana's battered body.
Sharp like a pin. Here. Sharp. No. Nothing at all.
The doctors discover some limitations to Dana's sensations. It could be his neck. A CT scan to check for spinal injury is now a high priority for the team. But first, he must be stabilized, while his neurological functions are constantly monitored.
3 silly questions. Can you tell me your name again?
Emily Gibbons.
Good. And where are we, Mr. Gibbons?
I think I'm at Sunnybank.
Big break.
But a more immediate problem presents itself. His arm is severely dislocated, and for Dana, who drives a transport truck for a living, this is a very bad thing. They will search through the smoky blues and grays of the x-rays to try and find out what damage the snowmobile accident has done to Dana's arm and to his life.
What's the date today?
January 22nd.
Good.
There it is.
He's got a dislocation of his elbow over here. That right there is supposed to be down here.
It's really not ideal to leave a joint out of place for any extended period of time because you can end up with a piece of bone that becomes dead.
The longer the arm is left disfigured, the more likely it will die. But there's more.
Looks like that piece over there is supposed to be up here. He's going to need an operation to fix his radial head. He's going to need this elbow reduced here in the trauma room.
Your elbow's dislocated. We're going to have to put it back.
The clock is ticking, and the team has to reset Dana's elbow before it's too late.
Sorry.
Despite the team's best efforts to save Dana's elbow, his arm tenses and fights the reduction. It refuses to go back in place, and as time slips by, the chances that this truck driver's arm can be saved are dramatically dwindling. If they sedate Dana, his struggling would no longer prevent the elbow from being reset. But unconscious, Dana would not be able to respond to the team, making it difficult for them to monitor his neurological functions.
What sort of sled were you driving? What size?
And I'm going to be off to sleep very shortly.
Trauma team leader Dr. Yi decides, despite his possible brain injury, to give Dana the drugs.
How you doing? It's okay.
I'm happy, man.
They get the elbow reset, and just in time. Dana is already waking up from the sedation.
Put your elbow back in place. Yeah, we did. Did you have a nice snooze? Now, don't ask me. I don't give that stuff out for home use.
With his elbow reduced and his condition stable, Dana is doing well. But he's not out of the woods yet. Dana hit a sign at speeds in excess of 50 miles per hour. He needs his head and neck scanned to rule out possible spinal cord damage, an injury that is casting the dark shadow of permanent paralysis over Dana's future. Across town at St. Michael's Hospital, a surgical team is getting ready to operate on 18-year-old Jake Gardner, who came to the city to find his big break. The impact of the collision was so massive, it snapped his femur, the biggest bone in the body, in half. Faced with a choice of 6 weeks in traction or the riskier and speedier option, Jake gambles on the surgery. If he hopes to continue with his new life, Jake needs to get his shattered leg put back together.
So the
treatment for that is to put a metal rod down the middle of the bone to hold the parts together, to stabilize the bone while it's healing, allowing the patient to get up and around.
After a day of facing dangers, Jake's fear finally overtakes him.
Okay, you're doing all right. You think of something nice, and we'll see you soon.
And while the unlikely procedure of threading 2 broken bones with a rod is actually a fairly quick procedure, the risks for Jake are significant.
There's a risk that as we pass the rod down, we could crack or split the bone up near the hip, which would be a bad thing.
If Jake's hip is split, he will be out of commission for a lot longer than 6 weeks, a scenario Jake was trying to avoid. The team gets the rod in Jake's femur, and his leg is realigned. But what is more important is there is no damage to his hip. This means Jake will be back on his feet and back on track in just a few days. A short while after his surgery, Jake's leg is doing far better than anyone ever expected.
He's already making bone in the fracture site, so he's healing very rapidly. We're allowing him to bear full weight on his leg. He's now comfortable enough to do that.
God works in mysterious ways, because I had a lot of time to think after the accident, and I realized I was pretty lucky to come out of that one alive. Because, I don't know, I went through a lot of my life not really caring, and this was kind of like a wake up.
High above the city, EMS races in from a remote northern park to Sunnybrook and Women's College Health Sciences Center.
Yeah, 27-year-old male.
Nick Martin is a young British world traveler who found his vocation in a flourishing dance career and found his soulmate in Maya Mitchell. They have recently become engaged, but a vacation in Canada may have ended all that.
Passenger on an ATV traveling approximately 40 miles an hour, no helmet.
When EMS found Nick, he was having seizures and then slipped into a coma. Now his mind occasionally and eerily drifts into focus for a second and then off again.
Nick, how you doing? GCS right now? It's GCS 14. It was 14. Now it's not.
This GCS, or level of coma, is particularly disturbing to the team. A drop in Nick's GCS is a very bad sign. It means that his neurological condition is rapidly deteriorating.
I would integrate this guy.
Trauma team leader Dr. Chugtai fears that with a head injury this severe, Nick's lungs could cease to function at any moment, and he wants him on a respirator as soon as possible. Any drop in oxygen now could kill Nick. If the team can't stabilize him fast, Nick may never get a chance to marry the love of his life. It's been over 48 minutes since 17-year-old Jacqueline was rushed to St. Michael's Hospital after a horrific car rollover. Early scans showed bleeding both within and around this young girl's brain. Now trauma team leader Dr. Ahmed waits for reformatted 3D images to decide whether Jacqueline will need a risky brain surgery to relieve the pressure in her skull, or if she should wait for Jacqueline to wake up, hoping her condition will improve on its own. If Dr. Ahmed makes the wrong decision, it could cost Jacqueline her life.
What is her gas, by the way?
It was 42, but I think the RT raised the ventilation after that.
The reformatted CT images come with fresh information.
And some pretty bad facial fractures from the impact of that her face took when she hit the pavement.
The crack runs from the socket of her eye down to her jaw, creating a free plate.
I'll wake her up and see.
Yeah.
Now we'll wake her up and see what her neuro exam is, then we'll decide. Jessica, it's Dr. Ahmed. So this trauma patient does not need to come up right now. Thank you, bye.
Dr. Ahmed decides against the surgery. She is betting that the fractured skull will float and help accommodate the brain's swelling.
Let's get her off the table, guys.
Now all the team can do is wait and see, hoping Jacqueline's condition will improve on its own. Something that is difficult to explain to parents who are anxious for action.
The only word you're hearing is she alive? They just said, doesn't look good, we're in a hold mode, just sit and wait, let's see what happens. And the technical stuff, it just went over and above, you know, didn't even register. It's just like you're dead, your brain goes dead.
It's probably the worst experience I've ever been through, and she's lying there lifeless. It's worse than going through it yourself.
For Jacqueline, who 52 minutes ago was just another teen full of dreams, only time can tell how much of her brain function remains, and if she'll ever return to being the same person she once was. At St. Michael's Hospital, outside the trauma room, parents of a teenage girl have had their world turned on its ear.
Just went, 5 miles down the road, and then you get a phone call, and your life's totally changed.
Although in a coma, their daughter Jacqueline is alive. But with a brain that is bleeding and swelling, she could still die at any moment. Rather than operate, Dr. Ahmed decided to bet on a fracture in her skull to allow for the pressure building inside her head, hopefully buying Jacqueline the time she needs to recover on her own.
Okay, this is an open skull fracture. There's a laceration underneath that. There's a linear fracture underneath that. So I got her to localize with her right side, not her left side. Okay, then you're gonna roll her off the board. You're gonna log roll her towards your feet. No. Going for a tube, that's good.
Localizing on both sides, that's good.
That's good. Tube, that's good. She looked like she was going for her tube. Yeah, she went both hands.
The team sees that the gamble is already paying off. Jacqueline reached with her hands, moving both sides of her body for the first time since she's been in the hospital. This means that her fractured skull must be accommodating the swelling in her brain.
It's too early to tell how severe that's going to be and if she's going to be able to recover from it.
She will likely live. But for Jacqueline, who has suffered such severe trauma to her brain, and for her anxious family, life will never be the same.
It makes you go through everything in your life. Question God, how are you going to make it through? What she's going to be like when it's over?
At Sunnybrook and Women's College Health Sciences Center, the trauma team is getting ready to scan the head and neck of a man in crisis. Dana Gibbons was out enjoying his life's passion when tragedy struck. Now what the trauma team is most concerned with are any head or neck injuries Dana may have suffered. The team likes what the scans reveal. Miraculously, his head and neck are undamaged. Now Dana can face his final hurdle, the surgery he will need to repair his shattered elbow.
Close up your arm. You're going to be asleep very shortly. We're in business.
Despite having x-rays, the surgical team cannot be sure exactly what they're up against until they see the shattered elbow. The surgeons have Dana's elbow exposed, and it's not good.
It's challenging in this case because the size of the bone fragments is very small. It's a kind of elbow injury. If you show it to 5 surgeons, you'd probably get 5 different treatments.
The only chance Dana has of regaining his arm's mobility now lies in the hands of orthopedic surgeon Dr. Richards.
I mean, some people might not try to reconstruct the radial head, but replaced it with either metal or plastic prosthesis. The problem with that is that, with time there can be wear and tear changes. So my preference is to try and reconstruct it if I can. Okay, you got the drill? In university, I worked in a steel factory, so I used to be a United Steelworker now. It's the same, a lot of similarities actually. It clicks.
Piece by piece, Dr. Richards and his team drill and screw shattered fragments of Dana's elbow back together. And after many hours of meticulous surgery, they finally finish rebuilding Dana's elbow.
I'm not very good at predicting the future, but for sure it won't be normal, but hopefully it'll be functional for him. I'm hoping he won't need anything further. I can't say that for sure, though.
There is still a chance that Dana's elbow will never regain full motion. But considering the tremendous force of his accident, Dana is lucky just to be alive.
What's happening in the back? The green car going. 6352 is 107 Sunnybrook.
Across the hospital, the trauma team is trying to save the life of Nick Martin. Nick and his fiancée were in a remote northern Ontario park when their dream vacation turned into a nightmare. Now his life hangs by a thread. Nick is in a coma, and the trauma team fears that his lungs could stop functioning at any moment. The anesthesiologist arrives to put Nick on a respirator.
You're in the hospital, okay? Just lie still, okay?
But there's a bizarre problem. Unaware, Nick fights the team that is trying to save him.
No, leave it alone.
Nick, we need to leave it alone.
Just lie still. Lie still.
To prevent him from injuring himself during the delicate placement of the breathing tube, the team has no choice but to literally paralyze Nick. But this type of sedation has its own risks.
See how it just comes there?
The same drugs that will stop Nick from struggling against the team will also stop his lungs from breathing. The clock is ticking. The team needs to get the breathing tube in fast so they can put Nick on a respirator. Any amount of reduced oxygen to a head-injured patient could prove devastating. Now the trauma team is in a race against death that will be measured in seconds. If it is lost, a love story will be cut short. Just 23 minutes ago, Nick Martin was rushed to Sunnybrook and Women's College Health Sciences Center after he was thrown from an ATV. After literally paralyzing the struggling man, the trauma team is now desperately trying to insert a breathing tube and get Nick on a respirator before his battered brain starves from lack of oxygen. Nick is finally hooked up to the respirator that he desperately needs to help him breathe again.
178 on 101.
Now there's something new.
He's got a high blood pressure. That's the first sign of a worsening head injury.
This indication of Nick's deteriorating head injury means he needs to get to CT quickly.
You gotta get him to a CT scan of the head faster.
But there's yet another startling discovery.
There's also some bleeding from the left ear.
Nick's ear may have been shattered, including the inner ear, critical for balance. An injury like this would put an end to Nick's career as a dancer. If it's not the ear, the team knows it could be the crushing pressure of a brain injury, bleeding from the inside. Either way, Nick is in serious trouble, and the team has to move.
And let's organize for a CT head and CT spine. We should actually get there as soon as possible.
What the images tell trauma team leader Dr. Chugtai is not good.
So this patient's CT scan of the head, of the brain. The brain is diffusely swollen. No acute bleed on any particular side here that needs to be drained surgically. So there's no need to go in and decompress one side of the brain or the other.
Nick will not need surgery, but what the team does learn is there is severe damage to his ear, an injury with staggering implications for a young dancer in the prime of his career.
Right now, he's intubated. He's got a low Glasgow coma scale, so it's going to be a wait-and-see game with him. Sometimes a bleed doesn't show up, and it may show up a day or two later. So sort of see what happens when you come off all the sedation drugs, make sure he's not paralyzed, and hope that he slowly wakes up.
The trauma team has done all they can for Nick. Now they wait and hope that he wakes from his coma. But thanks to their remarkable efforts and Nick's own indomitable will to survive, he's at least still alive. Now, 4 months later, Nick has survived being thrown from his ATV. And he has returned to hospital to learn how well his ear injury has been healing.
My ear was damaged. I could still hear in it, but I was tested with my head trauma person. She wanted to get me to do some turns, some jumps. She gave me these things to do across the room. It wasn't basically my balance and that, which obviously would affect me as a dancer. It wasn't damaged at all. So she said, no, definitely you can see that your balance is fine and that you're going to keep improving. So it's okay. Try and build my stamina back up and basically generally just get my fitness back up to the point where I was before the accident.
Nick will be dancing again, and he and his fiancée Maya are back on track, thanks to the efforts of the trauma team in the first critical hour.
And they gave him the best care, they really did.
Saving my life because, in many ways I could have died doing what I did.
Five weeks after his arm was devastated in an accident, Dana Gibbons is recovering.
Fortunately, with the help of all the hospital people and everything with the surgery and all that, they say there's a good possibility we'll be 100% when we're done. I mean, I'm really lucky that I'm alive as far as I'm concerned. It could have been a whole lot worse. I came straight to the trauma room. And Sunnybrook was fantastic. I remember waking up and seeing all the doctors around.
Due to the quick response of the trauma team, Dana's not just going back to work. He can now get back to play.
We're working on getting my sled back together. I'll be ready to go for next year, then there's no doubt about it.
It's been 6 weeks since 17-year-old Jacqueline was horribly injured in a car accident. Her life was left hanging by a thread when she suffered a severe brain injury. One that now, and every day for the rest of her life, she will have to come to terms with.
Because to look at someone like Jacqueline, she looks like a normal teenager. But you scratch the surface a bit and be with her a little bit, her journey's just beginning. And she's just beginning to deal with the effects and results of this brain injury that she's going to have to live with for the rest of her life.
I can't think right. I have short-term memory loss. I can't remember people's names. And there's just a lot that I can't do because I can't remember that I did it. It's weird just to think you're just going to the laundromat to do laundry and this happens to you. And everything changes.
Jacqueline will never be the same person she once was, and she now has simpler dreams.
Just getting better, learning how to read, and be myself again. That's all I really want. Is to be like what I used to be.
But thanks to the incredible work of the men and women of the trauma team, Jacqueline can now take the first steps on her long road to recovery, while her parents have the bittersweet experience of watching their beloved daughter grow up all over again.